for doing this.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze, our Friday Frontliner today with J. Ryan Stradal. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
You're welcome. It's always like, is it J. Ryan or is it just Ryan? Or is it like
You can
Yo
say Jay or Ryan, yeah.
J.
Just say Jay so we have more room for more important words.
I don't know. I think your name is like super important. But we are here today with my friend J. Ryan Stradal talking about his brand new book. Notice I dressed like the book. Saturday Night at the Lakeside Supper Club.
Good work. Yeah.
I did. Those of you who are listening to this on audio, I am wearing a very fetching mustard colored shirt, which is not quite as beautiful as the yellow on the cover of this book. I'm so excited to talk about it. Just a few words about the Blaze. If you are a return watcher of the Blaze, welcome. Thank you for bringing your light to the party. If you're new to the Blaze, please know that we are a team of 35 creative professional volunteers dedicated to helping writers reach their readers. Now that COVID is, knock on wood, over, we started as a sort of crisis response to put writers online during the pandemic, and we have discovered that readers still love connecting with writers from the comfort of their living rooms with nobody even having to wear pants. So that is what we do. I won't even ask if our guest today is wearing pants, but you can mull your answer while I finish our little commercial. If you like what you see here, please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. We are ubiquitous. And you'll notice on YouTube now, this is new as of yesterday, we have a tiny little heart underneath the video, and that means that if you want to slip $1 in the tip jar, you can do that by smashing that heart. So smash the heart if you want to say thank you to our volunteer staff, and also please sign up for our newsletter at www.amightyblaze.com so you'll never have literary FOMO ever again. No mo FOMO. Nobody likes that. So now that that's out of the way, welcome again, my friend. We are so excited to talk about your new book, Saturday Night at the Lakeside Supper Club.
Thank you. I am too.
You're like, I think I can talk now.
Yeah, so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to read your bio. So for those of you who do not know J. Ryan yet, you will be very excited after this interview to know him more. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller Kitchens of the Great Midwest and the national bestseller The Lager Queen of Minnesota. Saturday Night at the Lakeside Supper Club is his third novel. Born and raised in Minnesota, which I have to say, as somebody who's like, third generation Minnesota myself, he now lives in California with his family. And I want to ask about this migration because I imagine that must be like quite a culture shock. In fact, if you don't mind, let's start there. What is it like having written these beloved books that I love that combine two of my favorite things in the world, which is food and Minnesota? Like, what is it like to be a Minnesota writer living in California?
Warmer. I feel like I'm blessed to have a foot in both worlds. I didn't feel that I needed to burn any bridges behind me or, abandon my upbringing and the family and friends that live there. I love who live there to move here. I moved here for work originally back in 1998 and worked in TV for a long time and just stayed here. So it's kind of an accident of fate. I'm still here, but I really love both places. I've got a really wonderful family of choice out here. A lot of fellow native Midwesterners are part of it. And I love to go back home to Minnesota and catch up with people there. And one of the reasons I love setting books there is it gives me a great excuse to do that. I think I'm going back to the Midwest like 4 or 5 separate times this year on discrete trips. So I'm seeing a lot of it. And, now that we have mosquitoes out here in Burbank, there are very few, if any, cultural advantages to summertime in California versus Minnesota. So I'm eager to spend as much of the summer back there as I can.
Yes, in the state where the mosquito is the state bird.
Right.
Which is actually true about Minnesota. And those of you who live there know that. I have had mosquitoes eat my legs through denim when I was there in the summers. But I have to say, Minnesota in the summer is the most beautiful place on earth, I think.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Yes. And most of my book takes place in the summer. Yeah.
As it should. Right? And I hope you're touring in the winter there.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, the winter has a few chapters too, but the summer, um, I mean, that was my favorite time of year in Minnesota. And the people I'm writing about in the line of work they're in don't get summer vacations.
Mm.
Like I think Julia, my character at the end of the book, says summer vacation is a tautology, or I'm sorry, an oxymoron. Yeah, for other people it's a tautology, but for her it's an oxymoron. Summer means I'm working at my parents' restaurant every day. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
I asked supper club owners when they went on vacation, and they were like, either in October, like during like near the end of shoulder season, or after tourist season's done, or like in March or February. Yeah, yeah, and that's it. They had I've spoken to people who've never had a summer off in decades. Yeah,
Well,
that's
if
what you
you work
do.
in the restaurant industry, summer is the busy season and also weekends. Like nobody who has ever been in the restaurant industry ever thinks of a weekend as being a weekend again. I worked
No.
in food service for 15 years when I
Yeah,
was supporting my expensive writing habit and submitting short stories as like a baby writer,
yeah,
and
yeah.
still as a writer, you don't get weekends either, really, right?
Oh,
Or
no.
summers for that matter. So the
Yeah.
two industries have so much in common, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, in the restaurant industry, it's often Mondays or Tuesdays, if any at all. And yeah, and all that's in the book too. Yeah, just how provisional and ad hoc some of the things we take for granted are, like vacation or weekends.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's also very specifically set in our home state. Now, growing up, did you ever go to supper clubs, Jenna? Do you know what
Oh
I'm
my
talking?
Oh my god, do I know what a supper club is?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
I know so well what a supper club is, and maybe we
Awesome.
should define this for those people watching who did not spend a huge amount of time in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. I think Michigan I have seen a supper club or two, like
Mhm.
basically the Great Plains, the upper Great Plains. Supper clubs are a thing. So can you explain the difference between a supper club and a restaurant? Supper clubs are just so luscious and
Oh yeah.
schwanky in an old school kind of upper Midwest way.
Yeah, well, that's right there, the milieu. I mean, they're usually the nicest restaurant in their area. They're usually in rural areas or vacation areas, and so they're a little nicer than the average restaurant. But also, quite often, they were a really nice restaurant like in 1957 or 1965. And maybe they haven't updated their milieu a whole lot since then, which is to me pretty cool because hey, a lot of fashion is cyclical. And yeah, and whether or not they've chosen not to update or they can't afford to, it's it comes across as a pretty homey, appealing place now that still has a touch of class. And one of the things I love about supper clubs is you walk in, I think you're made to feel more like a guest in someone's home than a customer in a transactional relationship. And then that starts with this free relish tray you get when you sit down. You're given a
Yes.
bunch of free food right away. This relish tray and also a basket of bread that's usually pretty hearty. I think you
You
can
said
get
bread?
I think
I
you
never
can get
had bread.
full. Yeah, oh yeah, I think you get pretty full just from the free appetizers that they give you when you sit down.
Dude, I have been going to the wrong supper club. So I will share
Oh,
my supper club memories
yeah,
and you can
yeah,
share.
please.
I would love to know your favorite supper club, maybe memory, because I know you've interviewed a lot of supper club owners to write Saturday night at the Lakeside Supper Club. But I used to go to my grandma's supper club in Caledonia, Minnesota. When
Mhm,
I was a kid, it was a big deal because the other restaurant in town was the A&W root beer stand.
mhm.
And that was great for lunch, but then for supper, you would go to the supper club, and it was called Elmer's. It was in
Ah,
a Quonset hut. There was
oh,
red
wow,
carpet halfway up the walls, which was like so exciting to me that the carpet was on the walls. And
amazing.
indeed, you would get a relish tray, and then my grandmother would also get a grasshopper to start out with, which is an
Oh,
ice
she'd
cream
start with
thing.
a grasshopper.
I
Yeah,
mean,
usually they end with a grasshopper.
I know
Yeah.
she went straight to the goods there. Like she would just
Oh,
like
yeah.
with her little shaky hand, she'd be sucking that grasshopper down. Then she'd have another one after dinner. She'd be like, "Oh, I can't finish this whole thing." So good, right? And then you get
Amazing,
like a fried
amazing.
walleye, and you get like a whole dinner. It comes with a baked potato and salad
Yep.
bar if you're really fancy. But can you please tell us what the relish tray is? Because this holds like supremacy in my childhood memories and imagination. It was so exciting to get a relish tray.
Oh, yeah. The relish tray is a special thing at Midwestern supper clubs, and it varies from restaurant to restaurant. I
Yes.
don't know if I've seen 2 that are quite the same. I mean, quite often they have what other people call crudité, just cut raw vegetables, maybe some olives, but I've seen them have cheese curds. I've seen them have pickled herring. I've seen them have pickled watermelon rind. It really depends on the owner and what they like and what they want to do to make you feel at home and maybe impress you a little bit. It's usually an arrangement of food that I think was, what's the word? Once upon a time, maybe meant to impress you a little bit. Like, oh wow, this isn't the usual just snack plate that um, you'd get at a friend's house or a neighbor's house. This is hmm, okay. There's a few things here that you know that I maybe wouldn't have thought I'd want to try or thought I'd see on a plate like this. And so yeah, it can vary from restaurant to restaurant, but you know what? I have seen a few places charge for them lately, but traditionally they're supposed to be free. And
Yes,
that
that's
is one
cool.
of the things that makes it special is like what happens when you go to a friend's or neighbor's house in Minnesota? They have you know, they give you something to eat, right?
Yes,
They ask
yes.
you to like, "Hey, take your shoes off, make yourself at home. What would you like to drink?" "Oh, yeah, and here's the snacks." Whatever it is, if it's bars, if it's chips and dip, if it's seven-layer dip, the relish tray is the supper club's version of that, of just welcoming you in. And as you said, Jenna, also the portions are quite plentiful, and they can include a salad bar too, like, "Oh, yeah, well, hey, that prime rib platter includes a trip to the salad bar," and boy, you're really gonna run a serious danger of filling yourself up before that prime rib is
Mhm.
in front of you. A lot of these salad bars too are pretty exotic and hearty. I've seen salad bars in Wisconsin that are just like, I could just order the salad bar. I couldn't even get everything I want in the salad bar in one bowl. Like, can I come back? But also like like different varieties of potato salad I've seen at a salad bar, like different kinds, uh, multiple kinds of Jello salad, all kinds of desserts. Yeah, just you name it, fruit. Boy, it's a spread in itself.
It
And
is.
so the idea of the supper club really seems to me like plenty and abundance. And one supper club owner I talked to said that his grandfather started serving really large platters at their supper club. Shortly after the depression or during the depression, and he wanted to make customers feel like it's okay, there's enough food, everything's going to be fine. So for him it was a comforting gesture. And and so this idea of like, oh man, you don't want to go out to eat in America, they give you too much food. Well, you're damn right, because it's also a good value. Whatever you can eat, you can put in a bag and take home, and that's your second meal. So you're actually getting two meals out of this. Yeah.
Yep.
So all that to me adds up to the Midwest Supper Club experience.
Yeah, like that sort of Midwestern hospitality and generosity. There was a supper club between Spring Grove, Minnesota, where I know you're going on tour, which is where my
Mhm,
grandfather was born in an all Norwegian town called Spring Grove, and Caledonia, which is where they ended up, like 10 miles away. There used to be a
mhm.
supper club there called the Skyline Supper Club, and you still see it. Now it's like a ghost supper club. But my mom said they
Aw.
used to go there, and the steak was so big that it would hang off the edges of the plate. Like that was on there, right? And I remember, like, there's still a restaurant in Caledonia called Good Times that I love to go to that has the famous salad bar, and it's sort of a supper club slash restaurant, so it doesn't have quite the same like 1950s, wooden and carpet walls ambiance. But I
Mhm.
never learn. I always order the salad bar. I go like 5 times to the salad bar, and then my dinner comes. I'm like, I don't want this like moose burger or whatever. But I like know that you don't understand, like, you guys, what a salad bar actually is in Minnesota. It has ham cubes, it has ambrosia, which is like a sort of a jello salad that has marshmallows in it. Also, my salad bar at Good Times sometimes has mandarin oranges. I mean,
Ooh,
it's
exotic.
fancy.
Three
Yeah. And
bean
then
three bean salad?
green bean salad.
Or
Yes.
the three bean salad with the two green beans and the kidney beans? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And like sometimes like
yeah.
chickpeas if you super fancy
Oh,
getting
wow, boy, now you're getting
ridiculous,
exotic.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so people are like, this is it when they come from out of town, they're not Minnesotan or from the upper Midwest. They're like, why is there meat on this salad bar? I'm like, because it's a legit salad bar, people. Like, now you've had salad because you get meat and jello. So it's like,
Yeah,
welcome to Minnesota, welcome to
yeah.
Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan. Like, boom, now you're happy. So I'm going to read what the relish tray is from your book, because I love this so much.
Oh,
Hi,
great.
Gail. Nice to see you. And hi, Melissa from Kansas. We're happy to have you guys with us today. Please tell us your favorite supper club / restaurant memories. On Florence's watch, the relish tray was a lazy Susan, and the relish tray is not a tray. It's like usually a cut glass dish that has different portions in it that are filled with these luscious Midwestern goodies. Black olives, halved radishes, pickled herring, of course, cheese curds, which I'll have you explain, carrot slices, and gherkins served with crackers. This to her
Mhm.
was a sort of exotic assortment of luxury cuisine. Like, so true. Like, I think the first time I ever had radishes that were cut like little flowers was in a relish tray, and like having olives before dinner and not in a glass of gin. Like, who knew that could be a thing? It's very exciting.
I know, I know. I came from a family that never bought olives. Like, my except sometimes to make, like, seven-layer dip because well, even then, like, there would be 2 seven-layer dips because not everyone likes olives. There'd be one with olives and one without olives. Isn't that great? Yeah.
That actually is
So
very thoughtful. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
And I think you should explain the 7-layer dip also. And then we might start actually talking about your book. But this is one of the reasons I love to talk to Jay Ryan so much is we both love food so much. And
Mhm.
if you have not yet had the taste treat of reading one of his novels, if you love food as much as I do, I'm basically like a yellow lab. Like, you will be so happy you did, and you will be hungry. So make sure that you have like a lot of food with you when you read the book. Okay, tell us about the 7-layer dip.
Let me try to remember
Mhm.
what the 7 layers were. Uh, a couple kinds of dairy, for sure. Sour cream and cheese, usually, a cheese blend. Olives sometimes, tomatoes, beans, like refried beans. Trying to bring this like, I've never actually made it. I've only eaten it only in Minnesota. Uh, am I barking up the right tree? Is there what am I missing?
I think so.
Oh, olives, yeah,
Lettuce,
let's do the olive option. Thanks, Melissa. Yeah.
right?
Um,
Right.
Jenna, what would you add to seven-layer dip that I haven't mentioned? Like a
I think
guacamole?
yeah,
Like,
that's
or
that's
kinda
so fancy though. I think I would
maybe
add
like
like a layer of like sort of like slightly wilted iceberg lettuce shredded.
oh, yes, 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 the lettuce.
Yes.
Yeah.
For roughage.
Oh, for rough absolutely. Oh, boy, iceberg lettuce was just an essential part of my childhood. I don't
Yes.
think I had romaine or any butter lettuce or any other kind of lettuce until I was an adult and I could buy it on my own.
And like what even is that weird like when you have like spinach or chard or kale or like all the things that we eat now on the left and right coasts, right? We're just like, this
Yeah,
is
right.
not actually lettuce. It's more like those are greens. It's different. But remember the salad that was like an iceberg lettuce leaf that looked like my hand, a scoop
Yeah.
of cottage cheese, and a peach half.
Yes, yes, yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
my dad used to grow kale on their farm to feed to
Mhm.
the pigs. Like,
So great.
what? Like, Californians pay how much for that now? Yeah, he
Yeah,
just thinks it's hilarious. Yeah.
it is true. When I was in Minnesota, I had a family house in Minnesota for many, many years, and I just sold it to a new family who loves it very much, and so I'm grateful, but I miss it already. And I had a massive garden, and one year I grew way too much kale because I thought kale
Mm,
was like a plant, and instead I planted it, and it's like a bush. So whatever you plant,
mm.
it's like this giant. So everything that year had kale in it, and I was posting on Facebook today. I had a kale smoothie for breakfast, and somebody in the same town, like 4 houses away, wrote why? What bad thing did you do? What did you do that? And they're like, "Oh, a punishment in the Midwest. Like, you don't eat
Yeah,
kale unless you have to." And I'm like, okay. So
yeah.
let's actually talk about this book, which does, by the way, have so much wonderful food in it. It's set in a supper club. Oh, and I should say another thing that distinguishes a supper club from a restaurant is often that there at least used to be music, like in the 50s and
Yes,
60s. There
yes,
would be like
and that's in the book too. Yeah, live entertainment, dancing. They're still to this day, I mean, they're fairly large pieces of real estate, so they can still be used for retirement parties, wedding receptions,
weddings.
you name it, any kind of large gathering, but, yeah, the live music, not as much anymore, and
Mhm.
most of it. Still some, but that used to be a central feature, was like this
Every
was
Saturday.
basically the local nightclub. Yeah.
Basically, yeah. So it was like my uncle Lowell, who's now 94, God bless him, and grew up in this little town, Caledonia, remembered at Elmer's seeing Duke Ellington. because the jazz musicians used to tour the Upper Midwest, and so that's like the
Oh,
story that I know best about Elmer's. That when I was a kid there, I used to go to weddings, and it would be all polka music, so it's like,
yep.
yeah, there's a lot of an accordion, a lot of accordion. So anyway, tell us about the book itself, please. I totally hijacked this interview talking about food, which is always a casualty of chatting with you.
Yeah.
But
It's
in
not a
your
casualty at all. It's a feature, not a bug. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, it's like this is like why we read and eat while we're reading your books. Such a joy, like for me, such a delight. So, if you were stuck with me in an elevator pitching me this book, how would you describe it?
It's the story of a restaurant and restaurant families over 4 generations. That's the shortest way I can describe it. Yeah, yeah, and how their lives and loves and losses, um yeah, well, not just how like, in their lives and loves and losses, but I'd say it's ultimately a book about legacy. It's a book, about letting go of loss, and it's a book that reminds the reader it's never too late to be a good parent.
I love that. Thank you. And I was trying to describe it when I was doing the social media for this on my page, and I was like, it's about food and it's about Minnesota, and it's also
Yeah.
to me a book about the kind of family that you find by fate. Like people talk
Mm,
about chosen family. You said family of choice earlier, but I also think about family of circumstance, and I'm
oh,
wondering
yeah.
if you can sort of tell us the origin story of like Florence and Betty, for instance, who first come to the lakeside and start us off there and then maybe take us through the journey that the family experiences.
Right, yeah, the first generation we meet, it's not the opening chapter, but the oldest generation in the book is Betty, who, is on the run with her daughter during the Great Depression, living in a series of provisional places. She had escaped a severely abusive relationship with, Florence's father, and, yeah, these 2 women have just kind of been on the run in 1930s Minnesota, living in guest houses, skipping out on the rent, working odd jobs to make money and eat, and one day at a cafe, they meet a fellow customer who is heading up north, and he's heading up north to return to a supper club that he has inherited from his father. He wasn't even meant to inherit it at this point. His father and older brother died in a car accident on a hunting trip that he wasn't invited on because he was a lousy shot. And because he couldn't shoot, he ends up running this restaurant. So that's already an accident of fate. And he meets these two. They're looking for work. They want to get out of Lake City, Minnesota, where they are, where someone is
Mhm.
looking for them to have their debt settled. They're trying to avoid that person. And, Florence invites them along on this road trip, this 4.5 hour road trip to the fictional Bear Jaw, Minnesota.
Bear jaw, I love this.
Yeah. And Betty ends up working at the supper club, cajoling Florence to also work at the supper club. And so that that relationship, well, that working relationship with Floyd evolves into a marriage. Betty and Floyd get married. So Florence more or less gets adopted by Floyd. And yeah, and the story proceeds from there. Now, all of a sudden, Florence, who a couple months before was, sleeping on a cold ground in a unheated apartment with no running water, is now now set to be the heir to a restaurant. And the irony is she doesn't want it. Yeah, she's done menial labor at restaurants and places like them her entire life, and she doesn't want that future for herself. She wants something different. The idea of inheriting a restaurant, running it, well, it provides financial security that she's never had. Nonetheless, doesn't provide any inner peace, or it's it kind of runs contrary to her dreams, and so she's got to reconcile that. Um, and she develops a friendship with the loner guy across the road who's a friend of Floyd's, and complicates their lives quite a bit, complicates the lives of a number of people in town, and eventually she's just kind of shown the door and has to leave by the time she's a teenager, and doesn't come back for a really long time. And in the meantime, has a daughter, Mariel, with a man she meets at a different job. And Mariel is very enthusiastic about the supper club. You know, she gets to know her grandmother, Betty, and goes up in the summer to spend time up there and willingly and gladly works at this supper club. And I don't want to give too many more spoilers away, but there's one more generation involved too, Mariel's daughter, Julia. So these four women tell the story of this restaurant that they all share, that connects them all, that they have very different relationships with, very different attitudes towards. And it's all about how it changes them and they change it. And just the legacy of parenting and inherited trauma over time.
Mhm.
But frankly, I think also a lot of laughs. I put a lot of humor in this book, a lot of classic passive aggressive Minnesota behavior and the kind of self-deprecating humor that people have, and you know the sort of humor that can emerge from characters when you get to know the characters well.
Mhm.
And yeah, I see Melissa chiming in that she loves intergenerational stories. I do too. And this is the first time I've written a four-generation story. And I just loved it. I loved getting into the heads of these characters and giving the reader sides of their personalities that they haven't told to their own children.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think it is a really funny book, and I was thinking that it reminds me a little bit of like the Minnesota version of like Fried Green Tomatoes, which is so good. Fanny Flagg is such a great
Yeah.
comedian as well as author, and especially with Betty and Florence gave me such Idgy Threadgood vibes when it because she's so it's not that she's tomboyish necessarily, but she knows her own mind in a way that you don't often see with like the young female characters. And what she knows is that A, she wants to be safe, but B, she doesn't want to do it on anybody's terms but her own. And her mom is so fascinating to me, Betty, because she is from the school of hard knocks, as they would have said in the
Mhm.
30s, right? Like she
Yeah.
really is down on her luck. And yet she has this sort of very contemporary, almost like woo, I would say, sensibility, where she's like always looking on the bright side and maintaining a sunny, positive attitude, like purposefully. And you just think, oh my God, how are you even doing this when you're like, living on a burlap sack basically, and like,
Yeah.
going from like really hand to mouth meal to like places where you can see your breath inside. And
Yeah.
so they're such interesting characters to play off each other. When you were sort of mapping out the story, did you start with the characters first, or did you start with the idea of the four generations like an accordion, and kind of like stretching
Mm.
them
Well, I knew my ending,
out?
and the first character I wrote was Mariel, and I wrote her entire story. Even though it's not presented in order, I wrote it in order. Then I moved on to Florence, Mariel's mother, and wrote all of Florence's chapters. And then I moved on to Ned, who is Mariel's husband, wrote all of his chapters. And then finally Julia, Mariel and Ned's daughter. And then I tried to figure out how to integrate them together to tell this story the best I could. And usually I opt for chronological because it's less
Mhm.
confusing for a reader.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, I do have to hop through time. The opening chapter is, this is true in a number of books I enjoy. The opening chapter is a little bit of a flash forward, and then we hop back 60 years or so, and see this now elderly mother that we've met or heard about in the opening chapter as a child, and get to know her. Yeah, and then it proceeds chronologically after that. But yeah, that was my discipline as I think of the ending, and then yeah, it's kind of a hack. I start really far away from that ending, and then in between the novel gets written.
You
But
just
you know your themes. You create characters that are either contrary or in some way opposing or unenlightened to those themes, and set them loose, and the novel gets written.
Mhm. I love how you say this like it just gets written overnight, like the shoemaker and the elves. It's
I guess
just
written
like,
overnight. If 3.5 years sounds overnight to you, that's that's overnight. Yeah,
I mean, in
exactly. It's
terms
like,
of
oh, then it
night,
writes itself over 3.5 years. Yeah,
yeah, right. You just leave out the relish tray every night, and the gnomes come and write it for you, right? In
yeah,
Minnesota, like
right,
that's what we do.
right.
That would be so great. Did you
Yeah.
also think of the restaurant of the lakeside as its own character? Like
Oh, very much.
I loved it. I mean, when I wrote my favorite thing, and I should like take a cue from you, but when I wrote my third book, it was also set in a restaurant named Masha's. And I actually loved Masha's. Like people are always like, who's your favorite character? And I'm like, actually Masha's is my favorite character. Because I made a menu, I could see the place. I had like pictures, like a vision board in my study about it. and I could trace it like over, its iterations in various characters' minds until in the end, because it was in New York, like it was gone and it had become a ladies' shoe store. And then when I wrote that sentence, I was so sad because I was like, Masha's is like so many businesses in New York, it sort of gets subsumed by um, like subsequent decades. But tell us
Mhm.
about the lakeside. Like, can you see it when you walk into it? Like, what does it look like
Oh, yeah. Oh,
at the
yeah.
start? And
Yeah.
then what does it look like, toward the end?
Can I put it in Mariel's words?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got that right in front of me.
Hmm.
This is how Mariel sees it. Every summer weekend, the horseshoe-shaped bar and its wood-paneled lounge were packed with people fresh from fishing boats and softball games and cars that had driven up from the cities. It was a place where people chose to be on the most memorable nights of their lives, and it was a pleasure to be at the center of it all. And later on in the book, she goes on to describe how later on how these walls that had allowed smoking for decades, even in 20 years into the 21st century, still smell like smoke.
Hmm.
The wood paneling, the tinny old speakers that have been playing polka for 60 years, all that stuff. The salad bar, which was a relatively newfangled invention, which the Sky Club, a supper club in Plover, Wisconsin, claims to have invented. And I'm not going to contradict them. The salad bar seems so inherently supper club that, of course, a supper club invented the salad bar. But yeah, that realm, it's usually what's a word? If there's windows, they're just, like, on one side, like, facing the lake or facing outdoors. It's not I don't often evoke them as really well-lit spaces in terms of natural lighting. There's a lot of electric lighting. It's usually really warm bulbs. Sometimes there's, like, old beer signs and stuff behind the bar that add to that warm glow, like an old Schlitz sign or Ham sign with the waterfall and that kinda stuff, and it just really feels like you're stepping into a time machine, but none or like a really nice finished basement sometimes. Yeah. And like the water cups, the red water cups with like the bubble, I don't even know what that term is, just that kind of stuff. Really nice, heavy flatware wrapped in cloth. Yeah, all of that. Sometimes there's, what's the word? Like a dance floor or what was that, a dance floor? So you'll see, like in Weederholtz in Meesville, Minnesota, south where I grew up, there's a section of the main dining room where the tables aren't on carpet, they're on wood, and that's where the dance floor was.
Hmm.
Where, well, I guess, it's still wood there, so maybe some nights they clear the tables and there's a little stage, they could have a band come in and there could be dancing again. They could bring back the accordions.
I mean, why would you not do that? I feel like there should be a resurgence of supper clubs with dancing all across the Midwest. I think
Yeah, yeah.
anybody's listening out there who is an upper Great Plains entrepreneur, like I have cousins who are starting their own sort of like wedding and event venue in Minnesota, but they're doing it on, like, it looks like Instagram, like it's beautiful, but it's just like this very like shiplap, and I'm like, guys, bring back the supper club, plaid
Mm.
wallpaper, red carpet floors, like you got to have, and the lighting is always, it seems like fairly dim, and then there's like a stuffed fish on the wall, or like there's a lot of taxidermy, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Wiser sign with the horses, it's so great.
yeah.
And then the
Like
polka music.
framed newspaper articles from 40 years ago, and
Yes,
yeah.
they're all
There's the
yellow.
owner there's the owner posing with Bud Grant or whatever.
Yeah, and like always, like the things about who caught the biggest fish, like that's always like the framed articles about the
Yeah,
fish. So
yeah.
great. So I love this. So the lakeside in the book is like its own character. Like tell me, like, did you do like a sort of a separate like dossier for it? Like how do you create your characters? Do they
Hmm.
come to your head as people who you just need to sort of channel down through the ether onto the page, or do you like sort of sit and say like who are these people and then write it down?
Oh, wow, great question. I feel like they mostly come to me, pretty fully formed. They kind of I just hear this voice in my head, and I start writing this person, and to figure out who they are, I start challenging them, because the voice almost always has an opinion or has a point of view. And I'll go, "All right, let me see how you put up with this. All right, what are you gonna do if this happens? All right. Okay, interesting. All right." Um, so yeah, like Florence and Julia in particular came out fully formed. They came out like Athena, like adult women ready for battle with a sword and shield all their own. They didn't need my help. Mariel and Ned, I needed to work on a little bit more. Mariel, I based heavily on my mom, who was a waitress at Perkins when I was a kid before she went back to college. And Perkins is one of the models for Jorby's, which is a different restaurant in the book.
Mhm.
That's the
Mhm.
restaurant chain that Ned's family owns. And Ned is from that restaurant world and marries into the Supper Club family. And yeah, and so it's provisional. There's a lot of characters that are kind of combinations of people in my life, like Mariel, and there's others that like I don't know who Julia is. Julia just popped into my head, and I just knew that she had to be different from her mom and different from her grandma, and or have some things in common with her grandma that her mom doesn't share, like a lot of kids do, like different points of connection. Like you can see how she belongs to this family, but the way she expresses it is entirely peculiar to her personality and her generation and that generation's values. It's one of the things about owning a business that lasts 100 years, which is super rare, let alone a restaurant lasting 100 years, is that it has to evolve in some way to survive, right? Um, and by the time it gets to Julia's generation, she's like, I don't know, I'm going to do that. Yeah, this restaurant's a real relic, and yeah, I got to figure out how it fits into my life. Yeah, it's a real problem for her. So yeah, all those characters just yeah came into my head in different ways, and the Supper Club. Thankfully, I knew that was a character, as you put it so well, would give them challenges, and just thought, okay, let me position each of these women in relationship to this place they share, and that will help me learn more about them.
Mm. That makes sense. The Supper Club is both a character and sort of an antagonist or like a plot catalyst, as it is in every restaurant family. I mean, I will always read a book about a restaurant because I love restaurants, but I will always read your
Me
books
too.
because they're about restaurants and food. Like I'm still kind of haunted by like the very hot ghost peppers and like great kitchens.
Yeah,
Totally love
yeah.
it. I have a question about this, and I would also like to invite the audience. Like, this is your chance to ask Jay Ryan these questions. Like, we're actually coming up on 40 minutes. Which is shocking to me. But if you have questions for our author, like, please put them in the chat so we can ask. Meanwhile, my question is like, and I kind of hope the answer to this is no. But my question is, will you ever write a book that is not food related?
I don't know. I feel pretty motivated to write about food. I love it. I love thinking about it. It just presents such a, I don't know, such a wonderful realm to occupy when you're making something up, because it's a really big undertaking to write a novel. You're creating a world that you're going to live in for years, most likely. And when I do that, I think, well, it's a world I'm going to have to like. It's a world in a lot of ways that can be better than the world we live in, at least, the way I write. I have a somewhat utopian impulse. And so that necessarily involves food. I mean, if I'm going to sit here and be a prisoner of my own imagination for a couple years, well, god dang it, there's going to be some good food involved. Um, yeah. Or there's going to be a question about food or a puzzle that I want to solve or something I want to learn about food. One of my favorite things to do when I sit down to write a book is pose a couple of questions to myself. And one of them is always, what do I want to learn? So I set my characters on a mission to teach me about something that I want to learn about. Yeah. And with my second book, it was beer. With my first book, it was a general range of Midwestern food. And with the third book, it was intergenerational restaurants, intergenerational family owned restaurants. Yeah.
I'm so glad that our producer Ollie caught that quote because I'm going to use it forever. Like I will attribute it to you, but if I'm going to be a
Oh,
prisoner in my own imagination, god dang it, there's going to be some good food in there. And I love this because I think, we don't just sit down and write. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, and finish a book in 3 months. I mean, some
right.
writers obviously put out a book every year, but I, like you, take 3 to 5 years to write a book. And so when aspiring writers ask me for advice, the old writing chestnut to me, which is write what you know, actually is replaced with write what you love. Agree or disagree?
Agree. Agree. Brad Listy gave me the advice early on in my career when I was shopping for agents to follow the enthusiasm. And I think that applies to agents, editors, and the writing itself.
Love that. And life,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah. Follow the enthusiasm. Yeah. Anywhere. And dating.
enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, not too
And
much enthusiasm.
I mean,
Oh,
otherwise your life is going to be like, sort of lackluster and lukewarm. You might as well go, like they call it, writing to the heat. But I think about that,
right, right.
follow the enthusiasm. And I've never been afraid of investigating something I don't know. In a book, if I'm obsessed with it, then like go there, right? Does that same thing hold true for Minnesota? I guess there are probably a lot of Minnesotans watching this chat, so you would have to say yes at this point. But like, is Minnesota also an ongoing enthusiasm?
Yeah, oh, I'd say so far, yeah, and I think it'll continue to be at least a part of my books, like it was in my first one, where some chapters are set in Minnesota, but not all. I'd say it'll be hard for me to conceive of a book that isn't at least partially set there. Just also as a young reader, it was so important for me to read books that represented my home state or even mentioned it. Yeah. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I think about, well, what do bookstores need more of? They need more representation of the kind of people I grew up with. They don't get to write books very often, let alone, appear in them either. So I feel both obligated and driven to do it.
I love that. I do write a lot about Minnesota. It's been a recurring character in every book. The town of New Heidelberg, which is Caledonia, has
Oh,
been in every one of my
oh,
novels. Um,
awesome. Awesome. I
right?
love that. I
And
love that.
thank you. But I mean, I think it's just because I love it. So I write where the love is, right? And I love the
Yeah.
people, and everybody in the town knows, they get a book and they're like, oh, is this street really Elm Street or Main Street? Like she's called it Lincoln Street or whatever. But
Yeah.
I think it's true that, like, I think about the writers of the Great Midwest. Like I think about you, I think about Nick Butler, I think about Lorna Landvik, I think about, Curtis Sittenfeld, who lives there now but doesn't necessarily always write about Minnesota. But like that representation of a very specific culture, I think, is part of what writers contribute to the overall pantheon of writing.
Mm.
Right? We each bring our dish to the table. See what I
Yeah.
did there. So Gail wants to know, I'm just going to answer this sort of quickly. Are there any
Mm.
Massachusetts restaurants extant or existing that remind you of the Supper Club? Yes, actually, there was like a fantastic restaurant called the Hilltop Steakhouse out on Route 1 that was actually like the closest thing I could get to a supper club. It had giant plastic cows outside that were like a little bit bigger than actual cows. And so I would go in, have a steak, have a scotch or a four, and then get out and try and like climb on top of the cows. And, that's as one does. So, but it probably it went out of business. And I will go research that for you,
Mm.
Gail. Like in your travels, what is your favorite supper club that you came across that you didn't know about before?
Oh, wow. Favorite one that I came across that I didn't know about before, maybe the Dorf House in Roxbury, Wisconsin. It's a German themed supper club, or one that has a, German angle to it, and that was really cool. Yeah. It's fun to see ones like that that have not only the classic supper club cuisine and milieu, but little something extra, that has the fingerprints of the owners all over it. And with the German heritage in Wisconsin, it doesn't seem like an outlier. There was a really cool supper club that is gone now called Turk's Inn in Hayward, Wisconsin, that was opened by a, 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 a Turkish chef,
Mm.
and he put Middle Eastern specialties among the supper club things, which was really awesome,
Oh,
and
that's interesting.
decorated the supper club with kind of you know a Turkish milieu, like this uh, incredibly, it had to be incredibly exotic, for lack of a better term, in Hayward, Wisconsin. And it existed for, until his death, yeah, I just love that kind of stuff. Love these kind of outlier places, but I'd say of places that are still around, I'd say the Dorf House. Yeah.
Does it have dwarfs in it?
Oh, no, no. Oh, I'm sorry. A Dorf, a DORF.
Oh,
I didn't
DOR,
mean,
dwarf house. I was like thinking about
yeah,
trolls
yeah.
and dwarfs
Oh,
and
yeah, that's hilarious. That's
yeah, yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And I have driven through Wisconsin so much to get to my house in Minnesota, and I passed the supper clubs and also like the cheese chalets, that have giant mice outside them and so on. So I could totally see that. But the Turkish supper club or Turkish themed supper club,
Yeah.
how did the locals react to this? Weren't they just like, this is not walleye? Like, what is this?
Well, hey, they kept it in business for decades. It was a
Awesome.
huge success. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. They enjoyed the heck out of it.
Mhm.
As far as I know, people in Hayward, Wisconsin had, hummus and pita before I did. It was, yeah, it's on the menu. There you go. I just love that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I did hear that some of the props, some of the signage and other items from the Turks Club got bought and reconstructed in a supper club in New York City.
Ooh,
I haven't been there. I don't know if that still exists or to what extent that was enacted, but I heard that like, oh yeah, the Turks Club, the woman who inherited it, the daughter of the owners, passed many of the things on, and the Turks Club or the Turks Inn might have been, reconstituted to some extent. I mean, certainly a different milieu, a different spirit, being New York City instead of rural Wisconsin, but still, the Turks Inn survives in a different permutation.
that sounds like a road trip. I think we should do that.
Yeah.
I also had the idea that when you get tired of living in California because it's too warm and you need to go somewhere punitively cold, we should open a supper club, bring back the supper club, and then have, instead of the polka bands, or in addition to the polka bands, we could have like authors reading series. So the authors
Oh
could come
wow.
to our supper clubs. We could all drink old fashions and grasshoppers and brandy Alexanders together.
Oh
And then
yeah, yeah.
have us, some relish trays until the cows come home and have people
Mhm.
read, which I think would be like the most fun ever.
That sounds great.
What do you think? And we have some recommendations here. Pier 4 in Boston from Gail and the Wayside Inn in Sudbury, which exists. Gail, thank you. That's going to be my next road trip. I'm going to go check that out. So, what audience questions might we have, like from our producer? If you could pop up, we have time for like maybe two, I want to say. If you have read her work, interesting. What similarities do you see between your community-focused writing and fellow Minnesotan Lorna Landvik's? Okay, this is like it's like a quiz, like if you've read Lorna's stuff.
Oh wow. Yeah, yeah, I have read her work. I think we share a similar sense of humor with our characters. Like I'm thinking of like Chronicles of a Radical Hag. Um yeah, I think you know what, because I one of the reasons I really admire her work is because of how funny she is and how uncommon it is uh to be successfully hilarious in fiction. And I attempt that. I think she's a master of it. So I think I strive to do what she does really well in that realm, is not only capture the essence of a place and set books in a location that you could honestly say couldn't be set anywhere else, but also add that humor and have it be character generated humor, not gags, not slapstick, not raunch, but like honest, like character motivated, character driven humor.
Mhm. That's such a great answer. I feel like there are very few contemporary Minnesota authors who are not funny, actually. Like I think about your work, and like it's not like sort of overt humor. It's not like snarky humor, but the characters are they're like sturdy, like sort of earthy, like people who know what life is about. And the humor comes from like their kind of no nonsense, like eye rolling approach to like how to handle life's difficulties. And they have a great sense of humor about it. And I always think of that as a quintessentially sort of Minnesotan/Midwestern trait. But if you guys love like the like Woebgone series from Garrison Keillor, for instance, or if you did love like Fried Green Tomatoes, I know that's about the South, but it's the same humor. Lorna Landvik, same kind of thing. Like you will love the humor in this book, or even I would say Fargo, although Fargo is really
Hmm.
dark. But I always
Yeah.
think about like the sort of deadpan humor in that
Yeah.
movie. I watched in Minnesota in a theater, and I thought it was like hilarious and was like crying with laughter, and everybody else in the theater was greatly affronted and were like, "Whoa, who do those Coen brothers think they are then? Yeah, we don't talk like
Yeah.
that. We sure don't. You bet we don't." And I'm just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so funny. But I think you'll love the humor in this book. Great answer. Do we have another question from our audience? Caroline Levitt Classic. What is obsessing you now? I love this because I was going to ask like, what's next? So,
Oh wow. What is
yeah,
obsessing me now?
what's obsessing you?
First of all, I want to shout out to Sally Kolmish, a fellow Midwestern author who commented. I really loved her book, The Best Part of Us. Hi, Sally. Thanks so much for listening today.
Hi, Sally.
Um, yeah, I don't know if I have an obsession right now. I don't know if I have time for it. I have a 3-year-old. I'm on a book tour. A tree just fell on our house, and we're living in a rental house that insurance is paying for. So we're a little preoccupied. Yeah, obsession. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. Just making it through every day with a smile on my face and a smile on, my partner Brooke and my son Audin's face. Like that's an achievement. If I have an obsession, it's that. It's just like let's put a smile on our face every day because it's been tough lately.
I'm so sorry. How did a tree fall on your house?
Oh, during all the rains out here in Southern California, we just had someone tell us that it was someone who lives in Bellingham, Washington, that Burbank got more rain than Bellingham this winter, which is
Yeah,
impossible to believe, but I believe it. We had 2 oak trees fall on our property, and one of them fell on our house.
I
Luckily,
am
no one was hurt, just the house, but, still a traumatic experience and really jarring, and
yeah.
disorienting, and this poor little 3-year-old is doing his best. I think he's doing better than us, just adapting to new environments and, you know? Yeah.
Well, like, life is so weird to kids anyway. They're like, "A tree's in the house now," but to adults, they're like, some things
Right,
that should never be in your house: fire, water, or foliage, like, should not be
right.
inside, or a wild
His
animal,
question
probably.
Yeah, his question to, Brooke and I was, he was asking, "What's those mans doing?" The workers on our house removing the tree, and he said, "Oh, they're removing the tree that fell." "Fell? Yeah. Can I climb it now?" And so
Right.
it like this whole thing that yeah, was a cataclysm to us is an opportunity for him. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
So,
You can put a smile
speaking to
on your
your
face.
point, just like, yeah, his brightness throughout the pandemic, throughout, yeah, the last few years has just been a real tonic for us. Um, yeah, in general. But yeah, once again, we're facing another challenge and he's putting a smile on our face. Yeah.
Last time I spoke with you, in fact, was in the summer of 2020 when we were doing Wine and Words, which is a Minnesota
Yeah,
conference that
yeah,
we
it was
put
awesome.
online, and Auden was an infant, so that totally tracks, which is amazing. Like, we've been doing this a while, right? A minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to show this comment actually from Sally, who you just shouted out. Many congrats to Ryan. Attention so well deserved for your lovely writing that reflects the beauty of the Midwest and the people who live there, your love for food and place, and so much fun amongst the emotions. Wonderful tribute to your mom, too. Gets listen to you on 1A. From Grateful Sally Colmish, author of The Best Part of Us. I love this. And I read this because I think it's such a indicative and like emblematic tribute from your readers who so enjoy your work, including me, even though, we get hungry reading it. And I particularly get hungry for both food and being in the Midwest. So before I let you go, is there anything that you want to say to your readers who have joined us today, in addition
Oh,
to
well,
like, smile when you see a fallen tree because you could climb that?
well, thank you so much for joining us today. It means a lot that you take time out of your day to listen to us and talk about Midwestern stories and restaurants. It means so much to me to connect to readers again after so long. Um, yeah, and support your local indie bookstores. I know they have a partner store for for this show, but if you're interested in ordering a signed copy of my latest book, reach out to Copperfield's Books, Rick Straw Books, and Mrs. Dalloway's Books, and they will ship one to you. And you'll support an indie bookstore in a local community, and it would mean a lot to me. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so you guys heard it here first. Please buy several copies of Saturday Night at the Lakeside Supper Club. Mother's Day is coming, by the way, and if you know a mom or have a mom or are a mom, they will love this book. I can guarantee that. And it's also never too late to start holiday shopping. So, but it's really a wonderful book. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Good luck on your tour, and I hope all good luck to you going forward, and to your partner and to Auden too.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We will see you next time